US President Donald Trump has made his intentions clear. He wants Greenland, but his European allies stand in opposition.
From a NATO context, the way I would frame it is that the western flank of NATO, which would include Greenland, the Arctic, is, given the evolving threat environment, is an area that we as NATO, Canada obviously importantly, given our geography, need to invest more in. This is a point that we've been making in recent years and since I became Prime Minister.
Breaking tonight, the Arctic just broke NATO's illusion of control, and Canada is standing exactly where it said it would be. What the Western Alliance is calling a sudden strategic awakening is, in reality, the moment decades of neglect collided with geopolitical reality. Emergency meetings, frantic statements, quiet panic in European capitals, while Ottawa didn't rush, didn't react, and didn't blink. Because Canada didn't just predict this moment. Canada prepared for it. For years, the Arctic was treated like a frozen footnote, too remote to matter, too expensive to prioritize, too politically sensitive to militarize. NATO assumed northern security could wait. Washington assumed old radar stations were enough. European allies assumed the ice itself was a defense system. All of them were wrong, and now they know it. What forced the realization wasn't a new threat. It was exposure. Trump's renewed talk of Greenland, its minerals, its location, its strategic necessity, didn't create an Arctic crisis. It revealed one that already existed. The moment a sitting U.S. president could openly discuss territorial pressure on Allied land without an immediate, unified NATO response, the illusion shattered. Because alliances built on assumptions fail the moment those assumptions are tested. Behind closed doors, NATO officials are now admitting something they avoided for over a decade: there was never a real Arctic strategy. No dedicated command, no unified doctrine, no serious long-term investment plan. 1/3 of NATO territory sat in the high north, and yet it remained strategically undefined. The Arctic was everyone's responsibility, which meant it was no one's priority.
We all agree in NATO, we all agree that when it comes to the protection of the Arctic, we have to work together. And that's exactly what we are doing. Then, of course, I'm never commenting when there are discussions between allies. That's not up for me to comment on, but I can assure you that there is complete agreement that when it comes to the assessment of the urgency of the security situation, not only in the Baltic Sea, not only on the eastern flank, but also in the Arctic and in the southern neighborhood, obviously also. But now, concentrating on the Arctic, we all work together. I can tell you that when we talk about the security of the Arctic region, there is no disagreement within the alliance when it comes to that issue.
Canada saw this coming long before the panic set in. Ottawa never assumed NATO would protect the Arctic simply because it existed on a map. Canadian defense planners understood a hard truth early. Sovereignty in the Arctic belongs to the country that shows up, not the alliance that promises to. So while NATO debated wording and worried about provoking Russia, Canada acted. Canadian Rangers maintained year-round presence in remote communities. Icebreakers didn't just patrol, they normalized authority. Operation Nanook wasn't symbolic, it was institutional muscle memory. Infrastructure wasn't postponed for future urgency. It was built on the assumption that urgency would arrive late and loudly. Contrast that with NATO's record. As late as 2020, proposals for a dedicated Arctic command were publicly rejected. The logic was simple and disastrous: increased focus might anger Moscow. Better to leave the Arctic under-defended than risk escalation. That decision didn't preserve stability, it outsourced leverage. Then came Greenland, the geographic hinge nobody wanted to own. For years, it floated in bureaucratic limbo. Part European responsibility, part North American defense asset, fully strategic, and structurally neglected. The United States shifted Greenland from European command to Northern command only last year, a silent admission that this was never truly Europe's theater. But the shift didn't come with urgency. Radar upgrades stalled, missile defense integration lagged, strategic clarity never followed administrative change. And now the vulnerability is public. Hypersonic weapons have changed the math. Systems built to detect Cold War threats cannot see what's coming next. Analysts have confirmed that key northern radar installations are exposed, outdated, and insufficient. The same defenses used to justify strategic claims cannot actually defend the territory they sit on. Canada responded differently and earlier. In 2022, Ottawa committed tens of billions to NORAD modernization. New over-the-horizon radar systems, satellite surveillance expansion, hardened northern infrastructure, clear timelines, defined outcomes, not because a crisis forced action, but because Canada assumed crisis would eventually expose everyone else's delay. Trump's rhetoric didn't create instability in the Arctic. It stripped away polite fiction. NATO allies are now discussing military presence in Greenland not to deter Russia, but to hedge against American unpredictability. Read that again carefully. NATO territory being discussed for protection from NATO's largest member. That single fact explains everything about why the alliance is scrambling. Publicly, officials stress unity. Privately, they admit there is no Arctic playbook. No agreed response to sovereignty pressure. No shared framework for northern escalation. Every move now is reactive. Emergency meetings, last-minute deployments, delayed recognition of long-known vulnerabilities. Canada isn't reacting because it doesn't need to. Its Arctic strategy was never built on alliance guarantees alone. Canadian defense policy is explicit. Arctic security begins with national presence, national infrastructure, and national decision-making. Allies support sovereignty, they do not replace it. The mineral dimension only deepens the failure. Greenland's rare earth potential has been known for years. Western governments blocked Chinese investment on security grounds, yet refused to invest themselves. Strategic resources were declared critical, then left undeveloped. Canada chose the opposite path. The critical minerals strategy committed billions, partnered with indigenous communities, and built supply chains that didn't depend on geopolitical rivals. Again, not in response to panic, but in anticipation of it. Now, analysts float ideas that would have seemed obvious 15 years ago, integrating Greenland into NORAD, creating an Arctic command, coordinating missile defense across the high north. Every proposal NATO is rushing toward today mirrors structures Canada already operates within, not accidentally, intentionally. There's another layer NATO is only beginning to grasp. Greenland's path toward potential independence complicates everything. Sovereignty transitions create uncertainty, and uncertainty creates openings.